Hey you all, it's Dayna with the Hardin County Extension Office, and we are going to talk today about microwaves. And so there's a couple different reasons that we picked microwaves to be the topic today, but mostly it's just because this seems to be an appliance that is pretty standard for not just homes, but apartments, college dorms, classrooms, different things, or different places. A lot of times when you can't find a stove or an oven or all the other appliances that we've talked about, you can almost bet that you'll be able to find a microwave. And unfortunately, the microwave tends to get the bad rap for being the reheating appliance or just heating up and making those frozen meals or unhealthy things like that. And so I want to talk about the microwave today so we can talk about all the good things that you can do with your microwave, the healthy meals that you can make, the fun desserts, different things like that. Because you actually can do quite a bit more in your microwave than a lot of people realize. And so we'll talk just a little bit about kind of the basics of a microwave, and of course they're all different. But then I'll show you some things that we can make. I'll actually make a recipe here really quickly, and then I'll show you two others that I've made this morning. I made an entire meal, a casserole, in just 15 minutes. From start to finish, it was so fast. I made a dessert in a minute and a half. Just takes no time. And so there are some things, that you are limited by. There are a couple of things that it's not best to use the microwave, but for the most part, you can make any meal that you make in a conventional oven, you can convert and make in the microwave and just make some adaptations to get it to work. And so we'll talk about it. Like I said, I'll show you this. I'm actually going to start this recipe first. What I've done is made our baked potatoes in the microwave. We've made two here, and we've just pierced that baked potato with a fork. The reason being because it's got a skin on it, and we want to make sure that any pressure that goes inside has a place to escape. Otherwise our potato or any food that has a skin on it is going to burst. So I pierced it 4 or 5 times all the way around, and then I cooked it in the microwave, high power, regular power. Most microwaves start on their high power, which we'll talk about, for 5 minutes. And so what I'm going to do now is I have here in this measuring cup, and I went ahead and just used my measuring cup, that way I have less dishes. So I got the biggest one I had because I needed 1 cup of salsa. So I measured my salsa in, and then I did 1 can of corn that I drained, and then 1 can of black beans that I drained as well. And so I'm just going to mix this up. I just dropped a piece of corn. But I'm just going to mix this up, and we're going to stick it, of course, in the microwave for just a couple of minutes to heat it up. And then we're just going to dump it on these potatoes. And this is a really simple dish, obviously, but it's something different. It's something that I think sounds delicious. I plan to eat it soon. And it's something that, if you're limited on ingredients or you just don't have a lot to throw together, it didn't take much. And so we can make it, it's a fun appetizer, fun party dish, or it actually could be a meal. And you can add all kinds of different toppings and things like that. So while this is cooking, I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the settings that are on most microwaves. There are some that are more basic, some that are much more intense than this one here. But for the most part, most microwaves now, if you were to purchase a new one, are going to give you some options here at the top of different things you can cook. A lot of times there's a reheat button, a defrost button, a popcorn button. This one has a beverage button, a chicken and fish button, potato and vegetable. You're going to see all kinds of variations there. It's a lot like the air fryer in the sense that they just kind of start or give you those starting points that if you want, you can hit that button and walk away if you want. I tend to still use the time cook option. A lot of microwaves, and again, not all, the first 6 numbers now are express cook, that if, like you saw whenever I did 3 minutes, I just hit the 3. And so instead of having to hit time cook 300 start, I just got to hit that 3. But if I needed 30 minutes, let's say, I would have had to hit time cook 3000 start. And so they've tried to make it with a lot of shortcuts and things like that, just to make it easier. and quicken the process even more so than microwaves already do. And so time cook, defrost, which we'll talk about. A microwave is a great option to safely defrost your meats. Say if you forgot to stick it in the fridge or anything like that. You heard it pop, which we'll talk about too. So I'm going to open that door and let some of that cool down. I'm actually going to stir this up just to distribute some of that heat. Within our food so that it can continue cooking all the way through, because of the liquid in that salsa is what did that. We'll just do that, hit start, keep going. So safely defrosting your meat. If you forgot to put it in the fridge a couple days before and you needed to do the microwave, it's a perfectly safe way to do it. We want to, especially if it's a whole piece or something like that, we want to make sure we're continuously rotating that meat. That way heat is evenly distributing throughout. We'll talk about power level, like I said, a little bit more, but you do typically want to defrost meat on a lower power level because we're not trying to cook the meat, we're just trying to thaw it. The only thing, if you're going to defrost your meat in the microwave, is that you need to then cook it immediately. If you were going to defrost in the refrigerator, you could still leave it for a little bit of time before you cook. But if you do defrost in the microwave, it does need to be cooked right away because you've already started that heat up process. And so we want to continue that. We've built it to a temperature that bacteria can grow, and we don't want to then cool it back down, bring it back up, things like that. So power level, most of your microwaves are going to have a power level button here. I'll show you whenever this is done, but most microwaves you can just assume are cooking on the highest power level. If you need to adjust it, it's typically to go down. Most recipes, we don't see adjusting the power level just because typically when someone creates a recipe, they try to make it as easy as possible, right? But there are some things that we want to adjust that power level. Again, I talked about defrosting the meat. If you are doing some sort of soup or something with a lot of liquid, that does tend to boil over in the microwave sometime, and so you can adjust that power level to about 80%, and that's going to help it from not boiling over so much. And then sometimes like chocolate and cheese and things like that, it's a lot like we talk about the slow cooker, that you can't make those things because they caramelize. Microwave, you sometimes want to do those on a lower heat as well. And so for power level, this one, for example, if I hit it, I have to do a time first with this one. So let me show you that. Let's type a time in, and then I hit power level. And it shows me right here that it's high. Mine, I can just hit power level first, I forgot. But it shows me that it's high. If I want to reduce that power level, it goes by percentages. And so if I want to do 10% power level, I hit the 1. If I want to do 40% power level, I hit the 4. I mentioned with you, if you were doing soup or something, you would want to do about 80%, so I'd hit the 8, and then I would hit my start button. And that's going to make it cook for whatever time I set at that lower power level. Microwaves have, and I don't think you'll be able to see this one, but they typically have a button. Maybe it'll open this a little bit more. Inside, sometimes you'll find it on the bottom here. This one, it's on the side here. I've seen them on both sides actually. This button here shows us what all the buttons do, and it tells you a little bit about it. And so for a potato, you know how many potatoes you can do with that button and things like that. But then we're looking for the sticker that actually tells us the wattage of the microwave, because there are a difference, you know, in ones that you purchase. You can purchase ones with higher wattage. It gives you the model number, all of that, if you're going to register it or have any issues or recalls or anything like that. It tells you the manufacturer date, and so you can learn a little bit about your appliance just with that one button that's always inside, that should never be removed. And so I do try to check that out just to see what my wattage is, and that way I can know a little bit more about whether or not I'm going to reduce that power level. So the way a microwave works, and this is heated, and I talked about, you know, the moisture content and the salt and things like that. There's high frequency waves, so microwave, right? And they make the water, the sugar, and the fat molecules in whatever food that you're heating up vibrate. And that vibration is what causes the heat. And so little known fact, but kind of a fun fact, is that if something that you're cooking has a higher sugar or fat content, it's actually going to cook more quickly because it has more of those molecules to heat up and vibrate. If you were to substitute, if you were making something and you substituted for the low fat or the low sugar option, you actually may need to heat it longer than you would of the traditional recipe. So if you've ever recently made a switch to lower sugar, lower fat, anything like that, and you notice whenever you make your foods that you're not able to do the same cooking time, that's actually why, because there's not as many of those molecules to vibrate to cause as much heat as quickly. And so I think that that's something that we don't think about the science behind it sometimes. We just think it's zapping it with heat and it's all the same. But it actually is some chemistry that's going on within your food. And so what's in your food makes a difference for how quickly it's going to heat up. A little bit more seemingly common sense to me, you know, the denser that your food is, or whatever it is you're heating up, the longer it's going to take. The more just solid liquid it is, the longer it's going to take, things like that. And so microwaves are at some point a trial and error of just watching your food, stirring your food. You know, a conventional oven, you stick it in and you walk away. We don't take our foods out, stir them. You may take it out at the very end and lift the lid or aluminum foil or something like that. But for the most part, we don't check it every couple of minutes and stir it up. Whereas in the microwave, we do. And part of that, like I said, you heard that pop, or if it was boiling over, anything like that, you're trying to distribute that heat more evenly. So you're trying to make it where the foods that aren't as hot get to a different part, maybe get beside a food that is hot, things like that, and so that those molecules can continue to shake and heat up. So this one here, like I said, salsa, corn, and black beans. What we're actually going to do, I'm going to grab a spoon instead of the fork I have here, and I'm just going to spoon over these potatoes. And so like I said, this would be a delicious meal. You could do any toppings you wanted, but just kind of a Southwest Tex-Mex almost. If you liked heat, you could add in some chilies, things like that. Just spoon that over, and you've got a really good meal. If I were making this, I'm going to set this back here, to eat, I would put some cheese on top, let that melt because of the heat from that corn and bean mixture. You lost another piece of corn. Okay. And then I would add avocados because that's just something that I love and I think goes on Southwest Tex-Mex things really well. And so for me, I would add those. So I just scored up half of an avocado really quick before I did this. And so for me, that looks like a delicious meal. Or like I said, a good starter point. Before a meal, you could even turn this into some sort of potato nacho, sweet potato nacho style, where you actually slice that potato before you cook it, or even after you cook it, whatever you choose, and make it more of a dish instead of just that baked potato itself. So again, quick, easy, not something you would look at and traditionally think, well, that was made in the microwave. That was done within 10 minutes because we had 5 minutes on the potatoes, 3 minutes on the corn and bean salsa mixture, and then we're done. So I'm going to scoot this out of the way along with my little cups here, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk a little bit more about the microwave itself, why I choose a microwave, how to choose the right microwave, and then again some of those conversions. And then I'll just give you some different tips for making your microwave cooking more successful, because we don't want to see dried out food, burnt food, anything like that. I don't want you to have something that you've made in the microwave and it's just spilled over everywhere, exploded, or anything like that. And so there are some ways to avoid those kind of things. Again, starting with just learning a little bit more about your microwave, how it works, how it cooks, things like that. And so benefits to a microwave, it's obviously faster, right? If we were to have made those potatoes in the oven, they would have taken half an hour or longer, and we just made them in the microwave in 5 minutes. The pie that I made, it took no time at all. The casserole that I made would have taken probably 45 minutes to an hour. It would have taken about an hour in the oven. and I was able to do it in the microwave in 15 minutes. And so it's just a great tool if you are in a pinch for time, or again, just don't have those traditional appliances. The other benefit is it doesn't heat up your kitchen or your house the way a traditional oven or anything like that does. We tend to see that be the big benefit to an air fryer right now. That's one of the things that people are loving about an air fryer. But your good old trusty microwave is the same way. And so saving yourself some energy costs, which is always a good thing when you use this as well. Then, believe it or not, and again I made that comment about microwaves tend to get a bad rap about always being for unhealthy food. We think about those frozen TV trays and things like that. And actually, if you were to cook your vegetables or something like that in the microwave, they can retain more nutrients than if you were to cook them in the traditional oven. And the reason that is, they actually have figured out that nutrients, whenever they are diminished is not the right word, but I can't think of what the right word would be, during the cooking process, it's because of how long something has cooked. We used to think that it was because of the actual temperature that the food reached, but it actually is the time that it's cooked. And so that's why things like the electric pressure cooker and a lot of times the air fryer and now the microwave can boast that they actually retain more nutrients during the cooking process than some of those more traditional methods that we think of. That's because they're cooking our food faster, so they're getting that temperature right up there, and then they're done, and so they're retaining more of those nutrients. So you actually can have a healthier meal out of the microwave than out of the traditional oven if you're making a healthy meal to start with a lot of vegetables and things like that. So the biggest disadvantage to the microwave, in my opinion, is just the counter space that they take up. And so if you are purchasing a new microwave, you just really need to consider what you're willing to give up in your counter space and what your family needs. And so obviously we don't want you to buy a microwave that's too small for your family, but you may not necessarily need one that's huge. And so I'll tell you just a personal story. The house that my husband and I lived in when we very first got married, we had no counter space whatsoever. Honest to goodness, we probably had this much counter space right here, and that's it. And so a microwave that went on the counter just was not an option for us because it would have taken up all of our counter space. And so we actually had our microwave above the stove, above the oven, and it was there. Some people, and I think you can see on the video here, put them lower into their underneath their countertops, and then different places like that. There are some things that you have to consider whenever you put your microwave into something, just with the way it's going to vent and things like that. I know, for example, my parents, their microwave is in a cabinet, and we just know that every time that we use the microwave, the doors have to stay open the whole time. But as long as the doors are open, it's a perfectly safe way to do it. And so don't just go stick your microwave somewhere else because you want to save counter space, but know that there are some other options. But if you do have to have the counter space, when we moved, my husband and I into our new house, we didn't have an option for an above-the-range microwave, and we didn't have an option for it to go somewhere in a cabinet like that. So it's going to have to go on the counter. And so we had to measure our countertop and measure, when the door would swing open, what it would hit, kind of thing, before we went and purchased a microwave for our new home. Because again, that was something to consider. And we had to consider, what do we cook in our microwave? What do we absolutely have to cook in there that we're not willing to give up, to determine what, kind of the pros and cons of the different sizes. And so that is something to think about. There are all kinds of different sizes, wattages, all of those things to consider. You can find microwaves that are more basic than this one here that still just have the dial. And so you actually just turn the dial to whatever time that you want, and you hit start, and you're good to go. And then, like I said, there are some that are quite a bit more complicated than this one even. You actually can also find ones that are more oven style, so you pull down, and you can do even more in those. They cook more like a traditional oven, but you also have that microwave feature as well. And so that's a little bit of a 2-for-1 appliance that may be worth looking into as well if you are limited on space. And so let's talk about converting recipes. If you do traditionally cook in your oven and you want to be able to make something in the microwave. And so first question everybody always has is time, obviously. And so since we don't set temperature on this, time is really what we feel like we only have control of in the microwave. And so anything that you would traditionally cook in an oven, you're typically going to start by cutting the time down to a fourth. And so then you can kind of add from there. And so if something traditionally would take 30 minutes in the oven, it's only going to take about 6 to 8 minutes in the microwave. And so that's why I made the comment that the casserole that I made that took me 15 minutes in the microwave would have taken an hour in the oven. Because I knew that conversion, I was looking at about a fourth of the time by using my microwave. Again, that's going to be a little bit more if you adjust that power level, but that's kind of a good starting point. If you purchase your microwave oven new, there's going to be a book that comes with it. That's the best starting point. That is specifically for your appliance and can tell you exactly how to use it, convert everything that you may want to know. The other thing that you're going to want to do is, since you're not cooking the food for as long in a microwave as you are in an oven, there's not as much evaporation of the liquid that's in your recipe. And so you're going to want to cut that down by a fourth. And so a fourth there twice. You're going to cut time to about a fourth. You're going to cut liquid by about a fourth. And so that's just going to help it where your end product isn't so full of liquid because you're not going to lose as much during the process. The other thing to consider is the dish that you're going to use. And so, and most things are really good about telling you on the bottom if they are microwave safe or not. But traditionally we see ceramic, we see glass, and then there are microwave safe plastic options as well. But you want to make sure before you use it that it says microwave safe on it. Because if you use a plastic option, even if it holds up, I have a friend that used to cook in college all the time, and she used this plastic bowl. And she kept saying, well, it's microwave safe, it doesn't melt or anything. It's not, if something doesn't say microwave safe, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to melt in the microwave. What it actually could mean is that there are harmful chemicals that are in that plastic bowl that won't affect your food with just normal use, but once heated, they could those chemicals could actually leach into your food. And so when we talk about plastic in the microwave, we really do want to make sure that it is microwave safe. Yes, because of the warping and melting and things like that, the potential for that, but really more for those chemicals that can get into our food that we do not want in our food. You also can cover your dish with microwave safe plastic wrap, parchment paper, wax paper, things like that. We never want to use aluminum foil, which even if you did accidentally use aluminum foil, you would find out really quickly that that was not going to be an option because it would spark everywhere. And so cover a lot of our dishes. If we do cover them, we tend to use some sort of venting. So, you know, if you do make something that's frozen or anything like that, it almost always has you slit the plastic cover first or lift, you know, one corner, things like that. Same concept if you're making your own homemade food that you're putting in the microwave and you're covering with a plastic top or some sort of wrap. You want to make sure there's a way for that steam to escape. The benefit to using a lid of some sort, whether it's the lid that goes with your dish or some sort of wrap, is fine. But the benefit is that creates a moist heat underneath that, and that helps cook your food. It also helps destroy bacteria. Everything that we want to happen while we cook our food happens better with that moist heat. But what we don't want is to trap it so far in there that, first of all, no steam is getting out, so we have the potential for that top to explode. But also we don't want that to just keep circulating in and adding more liquid and into things like that into our dish, which then sometimes can create a soggy product. Not always, but sometimes. So you want to make sure that that steam has a place to go. I'll tell you one thing that I do a lot of times if I am reheating a dish, not necessarily with cooking, but if I am reheating a dish, especially if it's something like bread or something that I want to maintain a certain texture, I will just have water in the microwave beside that dish. Or if it's like pasta or something, I'll sprinkle some water on top of it to start. So give it some water to create that steam and that moist heat as a starting point, and that way the microwave doesn't dry out my food. But if it's something, like I said, like bread or whatnot that I don't want to get soggy, I'll just put that water or moisture, whatever it is, liquid, beside that food instead. So that is an option. So you can always use little casserole dishes, ramekins, things like that in the microwave because they tend to be ceramic. And I will tell you, if you are reheating a dish, and these are small, I know, but they're the perfect way to show you this. If you are reheating a dish, it actually is better to use a round dish than a square or oblong or something like that. And so the reason for that, I'm going to set this aside, is that the circulation of heat and everything that's going on, it just transfers better in a round dish. And so the square, you can almost kind of think of it as it's got those corners to kind of bump into and bounce off of, and it just, the whole process happens better in a round dish. And so something to consider, not a necessary thing at all, but definitely something to consider, that it will help your food cook a little more evenly, a little bit better, things like that. So I'm going to read some notes here because there's a couple of tips that I really want to tell you, and I will be honest, I don't know them all off the top of my head. I use my microwave frequently, and I don't just reheat it, and I do make food in it. But in looking for doing this video, I even learned so much about the microwave and different things that you can do. And so, you know, I talked to, you know, about the food with skin, make sure that you're piercing that, scoring it, something like that. We talked about round dishes, things like that. But there's a couple of things that I would have never considered. So some people say to actually reduce the amount of seasoning in your recipe if you're going to cook it in the microwave versus the oven. And then once it's done, you've reduced the seasoning, you take it out, then taste it and add more if needed. But that actually seasonings in that quick heat get a little bit stronger. And so the amount that you would traditionally use may be too strong if you're cooking in the microwave. That's not something I had heard before, and so I'm curious to do some taste tests and try that out. If you double a recipe, don't automatically double the time, even though that seems kind of to be the no-brainer. Start by just doubling it by half. And so you're looking at a 30-minute recipe and you double it. Don't go to an hour, go to 45 minutes. And start from there. If you're ever unsure about the cook time in a microwave, always start on the lower end. We can always continue to cook. We can't uncook, right? And so always start on the lower end. If you're ever really worried about something drying out or anything like that, try that power level and do some playing around with that. So cut your food into even pieces. That's going to help things cook more evenly, obviously. We want to take those large cuts of meat, and if we're not defrosting, like I said, we're actually going to cook them. We would want to reduce the power. And so what we want, kind of think about it like, you know, grilling. It's really easy to cook that outer level, right? But sometimes we have a more difficult time reaching that inner level. And so if we cook meat on full power, the outside is going to get totally done, and the heat may not actually reach the inside. Whereas if we reduce that power by 50%, we have a longer time at a slower heat to reach that inside of our whole meat and then cook towards the outside. And so reduce your level there, that way you don't overcook the outside of the meat. I talked about stirring food throughout or rotating if you have to. We also want to always let food rest. You see a lot of recipes that say, let sit for 2 minutes. And I know I, for one, almost would never wait that 2 minutes because I thought it was just to cool down my food. And I thought it was just so I didn't burn my mouth, that way I didn't, you know, get mad at the company or not buy that food again, right? But actually what's happening there is your food is continuing to cook. And so yes, it has the benefit that it is cooling down a little bit for your touch, but really your food is continuing to cook without the heat being right on it, but being done. If we were to leave it in there cooking for that last 2 minutes, it would overcook. But since it's got that heat built in, we don't open the door, we leave it just sitting in there for 2 minutes in the warm area, it can continue to cook at a little bit slower heat, and then it's right where they want it to be. And so that rest period is not just to not burn the roof of your mouth like I always thought. And so that I just thought was something interesting. I'm also going to tell you a couple of tips on specific foods. So if you were trying to soften dried fruits, You can place your fruit in a small bowl and actually sprinkle them with water, and then cover them with plastic wrap and heat for 30 to 40 seconds. And so sometimes dried fruits can be a little bit tough, especially if they're like a chip or something, and you can actually soften those up. Maybe especially if you've got littler kids who are wanting to eat them or are going to use them, or maybe you're putting them in a recipe that you don't want them to be crispy, you want them to be a little bit softer. If you're going to melt butter or chocolate, and so you can put 1/4 pound of butter or 1 square of chocolate in a dish, and then we're going to power that down to the medium-low setting. And then do it for 1 to 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, things like that. Stir before you add more. And so let that get done, distribute that heat, add a little bit more, continue cooking, stir and go from there. But that medium-low is going to help it not caramelize, not burn, things like that. You can toast coconut in the microwave. So spread 1/3 cup of coconut on a pie plate, and then cook it on high for 1 to 1.5 minutes. And then stir it twice while you're doing it, flip it, however you want to do it, and make sure that you are getting an even cook as you do it. You actually can also use your microwave to do things that have nothing to do with cooking, right? So if you have an odor in your oven, you can combine water with the juice of a lemon, and actually you can even include the peel in that if you want. Put that in a small bowl and heat it in your microwave on 5 minutes. And then what you're going to do is just take that cloth and wipe down the interior of your oven. Say you wanted to clean your microwave, you could do the same as well. That is going to help loosen everything up around here, disinfect with the lemon, and then it just wipes right off because of the heat as well. You can dry herbs in your microwave. We talked last month, if you're watching this on the library page, about the dehydrator and dehydrating those herbs. You can do those in the microwave as well. So some sprigs on paper towels, between paper towels, heat on high about 1.5 minutes or until it's dry. And you just want to make sure any herbs or anything like that that you're doing, you're checking frequently. Let's see. One of my favorite ways to use the microwave is to soften hard ice cream, right? I want to be able to get my spoon in there and eat it. And so you always can stick that, your gallon of ice cream in the microwave really quickly just to soften that a little bit. If you're serving at a party or anything like that, there's nothing worse than trying to scoop that out and having a hard time doing that. Soften brown sugar, soften cream cheese, different things that you can do to assist you in other recipes can be done with your microwave as well. One of the things that is on here that I think is kind of funny is you can separate cold bacon. So you can actually just stick the packages in there really quickly for about 15 seconds. And then, because sometimes bacon out of the packages is hard to get apart, right? And it rips or tears or something like that. And so just heating that up for about 15 seconds helps that to separate much more easily. You can make croutons. So you cut dry bread, enough to make 2 cups of bread cubes. Spread them in a shallow dish. A pie plate, again, is a great option. And then cook on high for 3 to 4 minutes. Again, stirring occasionally, distributing that heat. And so those are just some fun tips that I thought were interesting. A couple of other things that I just want to add. It is important that you keep your microwave clean. And the reason being that if you have, say, a soup or something that's spilled over, and then you just continually cook it over and over because you don't have time to clean off whatever. The more times that you cook that food onto your plate here, your door, whatever it is, the harder it's going to be to remove later. Plus, depending on what it is that spills over, it actually can leak some of its scent and flavor and whatnot into whatever food you cook afterwards. So do try to keep your microwave clean. This plate is removable. And so it's easy to wash. Of course, we have our, I don't even know what you call this, I probably should look that up. Our wheels here kind of look like little roller skates for our plate. Mine actually is removable, that I could wash that as well. And then your door. Another thing that you can do is to heat up a little bit of vinegar. And I'm going to try to do that quietly. And always make sure that your plate rotates whenever you put it back in, because that rotation is extremely important in the cooking of your food. And so you always want to make sure that your plate can rotate, that whatever you put on your plate doesn't hit the side, scoot it over, anything like that as it's cooking. But plate, or I was talking about vinegar. You can stick a bowl of vinegar in here, heat it up really quickly, and again, kind of like that bowl with the lemon juice, it's just going to help everything just dissolve right off, and then you just wipe it off to keep your microwave clean. If you all have questions at all, please ask. My email is at the bottom of the screen. It's just dana.fintress@uky.edu, and I would love to send you the recipes. I'm actually going to show you some recipes that I've made, and then at the end of this, there's going to be a clip of each of the recipes or that I've talked about, and it's a couple of others that I just thought were interesting or easy, or that I have made that are delicious. And so you'd be able to screenshot those if you're watching, say on your phone or something like that. Or if you would like those in an email version, I would be more than happy to send you that, send you the literature, anything like that as well. And so please don't hesitate to ask. If you know some microwave tricks, I would love to hear them, because we do. And you can see we're in our office kitchen here, and the microwave that you can see over there, we actually have 4 of those within the kitchen, and this is the one that we have in a different room. But we do kids cooking classes here, and we try to teach them to use the microwave as well, because that is a safer option for kids to cook some food. And so if you've got some microwave recipes, some tips, tricks, anything like that, I would love to hear them as well. I hope you learned something new, or that you try a new recipe based on this. And past that, have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.